Stillwater's Morning Scramble. It's 8:15. Steve Daniels and Dr. Jeremy Cook is in today on a rainy morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome back to Planet Earth. Where you been?
A lot of places.
Jeremy, of course, is with the NOC, and he just arrived last night. I wasn't sure because we were communicating.
Yeah.
You were commuting. I was communicating via text, and you were in another continent.
Yes.
And so I thought, I think that got through, and I think he's coming in Thursday, but then you were in Iceland when I talked to you last.
Right. Yeah. And then all the countries we went to were Sweden, Denmark, Scotland, Iceland, Northern Ireland, and then England.
Well, that's a great trip, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good time.
How long were you gone?
A little over 2 weeks.
Okay.
It was a good time. It was a long trip, with the students and all that. But I would say that because I knew work has to continue and has to go on, then it was time to come back and start on that. But was I ready to come home per se? I could have spent a couple more days in London, those type of things. But, there's work to be done. There's a job and jobs that have to be done. So, at some point you have to come back to the real world and get back on it.
Did you have a good group that you went with?
Yeah, it was a good group. It was a different group. The last couple of trips have been a little bit older groups, which is kind of unusual, and that creates a much different dynamic.
By older, you mean over 30?
Well, not necessarily over 30, but close to 30. Some of them were close, mid upper 20s.
Which is different than a 19-year-old.
Right.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, much different. And the spring break trip was like that, and this summer trip was, again, a little bit older, and it creates a different dynamic. It's not. I'm not saying that's bad by any stretch. It's just It's just interesting. It's just different than you have to handle a 24-year-old differently than a 19-year-old in certain things, and it's fun. That's one of the reasons why it is so good, and it's such an interesting program is because that keeps us challenged. 19-year-olds haven't seen as much as a 24-year-old. That's especially that 5-year gap is huge.
Yeah.
And so it keeps us as professors on our toes because we have to know so much about what we're doing.
I would guess when you're 19, I'm just going on my experience, when you're 19, you really don't know the history of these places. I mean, you might have had it a little bit in school, but you haven't watched the news. You're not keeping up with current events. By the time you're 24, you have a little life experience, and maybe you've looked in and you know what's going on in different regions of the world. Well,
and you might even know somebody from one of those areas. At 19, you've been probably a little bit more sheltered, and a little bit, just with the high school world. But by the time you're in the 24, 25 range, you've been out, you've seen, you've met people from those areas, and so it makes it a little bit more real. And so when you're traveling with the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, it's a lot more of the wow factor, huge eyes and this, and 24 and 25-year-olds, it's more about the why factor. Why is this going on? Why do these things happen? Why is it important to know this?
When you're 25, you've probably met your significant other at a different place, and 19, you met her at Sonic. Right.
That's not a bad analogy. Yeah, that's not a bad analogy.
Anyway, you had a great trip. Before we dive into your trip, you kind of were out there encouraging us when we were talking about the education world. And obviously we have an election next Tuesday, which is very important. And I kind of hem-hawed around with Dr. Kane as the administrator here.
Yes.
They fall under certain...
Right.
She can't make an endorsement or anything, so I really didn't want to put her on a spot where she kind of had to. And so I was trying to navigate that to where I didn't put her in an uncomfortable situation.
Right.
And when I was talking about Janet Barisi, you were more than willing to step up and make comments.
Right.
And obviously there's been a lot of negative around about Janet Barisi, really since she took over. Who would be better? I guess you can make an endorsement.
Well, who would be better? I don't know. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of names. Okay, a lot of names in the hat. And so I can't really make an endorsement. But people need to be educated as to why there is seems to be a lot of dislike of Janet Barisi with the third grade testing recently. The way the tests have been implemented the past couple of years has been an unmitigated disaster with having to stop in the middle of a test and tests not counting, and schools are wasting lots of time on lots of times that could be spent educating the kids taking these tests, and then to be told, oops, sorry again. that it gets really frustrating, and it's hard for the schools to continue to operate in a good manner when this larger system that's supposed to determine so many things is a failure. And so, where does the buck stop on that? Is it the company? Is it the first time? And again, I'm working off of tired memory here, but the schools were blamed on the issues. And so the second year in a row, is it still the school's fault? Whenever it's the exact same problem, and the schools did everything they could to correct it. No, to me, at that point, it seems to be a larger issue. And again, I'm just speaking out of tired memory here, and that's just how it comes across. Because I have kids, in the public school system, and when in third grade when they come home, wasted a full day of school taking a test that doesn't count. That can be frustrating for people, and we need to know why that is going on and who is ultimately responsible for that.
And sometimes it seems like if there's that much angst between the leader and the administrators, even though maybe they both have a point, sometimes you got to get along, and you need a new group in there just that can row the boat in a direction and get somewhere. Well, is that fair to say?
Oh, that's absolutely fair to say, because even if you don't agree on things, you have to find a way, you have to look at the bigger picture. What's best for the kids? And when people who are, in the Janet Barisi camp and running her campaigns call educators dirtbags on Twitter, that kind of gives you a little bit of idea of what you're dealing with. The animosity, nothing can come out of that. You have to find at least a middle ground. You have to be willing to go, okay, a mistake was made, let's fix it, as opposed to let's do it again. And I don't know if anybody's on Twitter or the Facebook or anything like that. There's a media personality called the Lost Ogle.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it,
and it's hilarious and a
lot of parodies,
yeah. But raised some absolutely brilliant points about this situation. Quoting actual candidates running, and then what they've actually done, and comparing the two, and saying, the most recent one that's kind of, you mentioned earlier, it's flying around the web, everybody's posting it and reposting it, and don't just take don't just read it, whether you like her or don't like her, you need to read the full article and make an educated decision, because some people could look at that and go, you know what, I'm okay with that. We do need to test these kids and make sure they're doing well, and that's great. That's wonderful. The Lost Ogle article that just came out raised some really valid questions about some issues that need to be answered. And if they can be answered and progress can be made, then I would support whomever that is.
So just Google that? Is that what?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. But I would support whomever is running if they can get along with the other administrators and figure out what is actually best for the kids.
Yeah, and I think that's what people dislike about Washington. I mean, what was Congress's last approval rating? Single digits, I think.
Yeah,
and it's really just because nobody can get along and get anything done.
Right.
I mean, you're not taking a stand one side or the other as much as it's like, as a body, you guys don't work. And so I think that's what people are seeing here sometimes.
Well, I would absolutely agree with that. And again, we need to know why that is. People need to be educated about this particular election. It is so important. There's a lot of taxpayer dollars. You guys are throwing around $1 billion or something like that. And I don't know the exact numbers, but there's a lot of taxpayer dollars that are at stake here. There's the future of our state is at stake here, because the higher educational ratings you get and the better students you put out, the more companies look at coming in. I mean, look at all the companies that have come into Stillwater recently, because we have a pretty good school system,
right,
and we have an educated population, and companies want that. And so when you look at the failure rate, statewide and those type of things, then something has to be done. And is it changing state superintendents? I don't know. I don't know if that's it or not. But people need to become educated and decide for themselves whether they want to progress as we are, or if they want to go a different direction. And it's just about educating yourself toward what they stand for and what they're actually doing, and then making the decision. If that's in support of her, then that's great. Good for you. If it's not in support of her, then find another person and educate yourself on them and and vote.